Citizen Oversight Committee to order. We're conducting this meeting in person and it is being recorded. The agenda for the meeting is on the city's website at www.santa-ana.org. Members of the public will have the opportunity to address the Measure X Citizen Oversight Committee regarding agenda and non-agenda items during the public comment section of the meeting. And especially considering this is September 11th and very important day of remembrance. So why don't we go ahead and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance wherever you're at. Ready to begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so at this time, if Kristen, if you could call the roll for us.
Member Chu,
Present.
Member Lewis,
Present.
Vice Chair Lugo,
Present.
Chair Johnson.
And I'm here also.
We have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you. And so at this time, we will have public comments for both agenda and non-agenda items. I don't see anyone here.
We do not have anybody in the
Okay.
queue.
Excellent, thank you. And so then we will go right into our consent calendar. Alex, did you have? No, okay. We'll go into our consent calendar, which is item number 1 on the agenda, which include solely the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have anyone want to have discussion or? If not, then
There isn't a discussion, motion to approve.
okay, motion to approve. Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Excellent. Kristen, can you call roll, please?
Member Chu,
Aye.
Member Lewis,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lugo,
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Yes, for me also.
Motion passes.
All right, excellent. And so now we are on to agenda item number 1 on our business calendar, which will be our revenue update. And I'll hand the floor over to Assistant Director Trinidad.
Thank you. So good evening, Chair Johnson and committee members. So this is going to be your sales tax update, which includes the final results for fiscal year 2023-24. This is ending fiscal year in June 30th, 2024. Yep. So here you can see our monthly receipts for Measure X sales tax and the final revenue received for the fiscal year. So the city receives its first payment for this fiscal year in the month of September. And the last payment, we get this in August. The last 2 months of the fiscal year, which includes July and August, are recorded in the prior fiscal year that we just closed as part of our year-end process. So pretty much the total revenue received for fiscal year 23-24 was the $83,602,679. Next slide. So as previously shared with the committee, we did make adjustments to Measure X updates throughout the year by a total of $5,256,360 based on recent estimates from our sales consultant during the fiscal year. The decrease, like we mentioned before, was due to sales tax estimates that did fall short because of reduction in general retail. This includes department stores, furniture, appliances, drugstores, and recreational products, and also the transportation sector decrease. This includes auto sales, specifically luxury auto sales went down, as well as service stations, which includes gas stations. Our final results were pretty close. It was a little bit slightly higher than the final estimate. So here, just a summary, a chart showing total revenues received by year. So there was an overall decrease of $3.2 million compared to last year. So this is a decrease of 3.7. So this chart, I think you're familiar with this, which summarizes information by reporting period versus the when received. Here we could see a trend. Our revenues are below the trend line, but as you could see in the most recent quarter, which is first quarter of 2024, These quarters, first quarter, you typically see a decrease, and this is due to less holidays during that period of time. But there is typically an increase after that. You do see before this most recent quarter, our revenues have been flat. And so we do expect revenues to be higher in the next quarters. So next things is we do have our next MeasureX meeting scheduled for December 11th. The other thing I wanted to mention to the committee is that if you do want to invite other departments like we did in the past, I think the last meeting that we had was Parks and Public Works. We're always willing to work with them and see if you want to either specific program or specific department to come and share information. The next thing is our staff will continue monitoring our revenues throughout the year. And we will propose any adjustments if needed. Right now, we don't have any recommendations so far. That concludes, yeah. And any questions you have, we're available for questions.
Excellent, thank you. We'll do questions starting on my far right, and yeah, go ahead.
It's not really a question, just a comment. So I know that overall there was a decrease in revenue from the 2023 fiscal year as compared to the fiscal year before, but at least we ended up slightly higher than what the initial expectations were, right? So I guess anything's better than nothing. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, and we'll just keep going.
All right, no comments from me. Thank you.
And
All right, excellent. Thanks. I have two relatively quick questions, I believe. So when was the last revenue adjustment made for the 6/30 fiscal year? Was that like March?
We did that in third quarter, which this year actually went to council sometime in May. That was, yeah, sometime. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then I'm glad it went the right way after we made that adjustment. But and then is on the line chart that went through, I think, first quarter 2024.
Correct.
Is there a reason why it did not go through the second quarter? Because I think we have that data, correct?
We do have the data for second quarter. The thing is typically revenues, they trickle in. We do get revenues, but then we'll continue getting revenues from prior reporting periods. So the number is not really reflective of the final results for that quarter. So we typically wait until we've gotten or received all those revenues for that quarter before we report out to the committee, because it might skew the numbers and make it seem like it's less than what it would be.
For accounting purposes, on modified accrual, we accrue 60 days of revenue. So that's July and August. And your final number, your 83.6 million, includes the July and August accruals. However, even though that's where we stop and cut off for financial statement purposes under modified accrual accounting, we still, like Alex said, we still continue to receive second quarter payments, like in third quarter, fourth quarter, fifth year, or first quarter of next year. So they really do continue for about at least 3, if not 4 more quarters. And typically it could bring in, we've seen that lag bring in like another $1 million that is attributable to that quarter, that it really lags that much. You have some vendors that are just simply reporting later than what they should, doing late filings and stuff like that. And so, I'd hate to show you a graph where it just like really looks like it's going, and it's not really fair, because another $1 million may trickle in.
So do we update the prior quarters then also as that?
Not on the financial statements, not on the general ledger,
What about on the graph
but
type of-
but on the graph
Okay.
we do.
On the chart
We
we do, but not on the financials. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So on your ACFR,
Mhm.
thank you. That is, it's not going to tie exactly to some of these numbers that we're seeing, just because we're not comparing apples to apples.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Because that line graph that we show you, it's literally like, what period was that vendor reporting for? So they may be reporting it 6 months later. And so we receive that money 6 or 8 months later, but they were reporting for a certain period. So we're looking at the reporting period for the line graph.
Gotcha. And as someone that just helped a client submit a I think first and second quarter sales tax filing recently. That makes sense to me. So yeah. Okay. And I think that was it for me on that. And so I think that we go to our next item, which is our expenditure update, which I think is also with you, Alex.
Yes, it's me again. So we shared with the committee our draft expenditure report. I just want to mention that we're still working on closing the year, typically all the way through December. So auditors haven't looked at it, so it's unaudited. So it may change with entries that are continuing being booked. So here. So this table is a high level summary of our total expenditures by category by fiscal year. The major expenditure categories on here is for maintaining effective 911 response, retaining firefighters, addressing homelessness, and unrestricted general revenue purposes. For maintaining effective 911 response, the major areas of expenditures here include funding for additional police officers, police department overtime, as well as ambulance service contract increases. So this is increases from inception of Measure X. The other category, retaining firefighters, this is what we pay Orange County Fire Authority for fire services. And what we report for Measure X is anything increases in services costs since Measure X was inception. So the next category, biggest category, was addressing homelessness. This category, our costs are related for public safety related to homelessness, as well as the quality of life team. Other major categories for this last fiscal year, we actually provided purchase of the Carnegie shelter for homelessness. We spent $1 million for that. That was one-time cost used from Measure X. And then the last category, unrestricted general revenue purposes. Let's see. The major costs for these include the vehicle incentive program, which last year was the last year for this program. Council decided not to extend it. Graffiti abatement, it also includes funding for pension stabilization fund. Those are the major categories under that area.
And also remember, there was the ongoing budget deficit
Yes.
from before when Measure X was approved by the voters. So that's a part of that 29 million too.
That's the bulk of it. There was a deficit before Measure X was approved of 10.2, and that's planned staff
Actually
So-
11.7.
11.7. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other categories includes fixing the streets. This year we did have several of one-time fundings for traffic signals, and then we do have recurring funding here for sidewalks, medium landscaping, as well as alley improvements. Next one. Okay. So this one is, we expect to have a total carryover of 5 million to the next fiscal year, which is 24-25, our current fiscal year that started July 2024. Capital projects usually take a while to get those up and running and completed. I think I mentioned to the committee, it takes, engineers need to design this. They need to do an RFP to get contractors to bid on the project. And then sometimes they also wait to accumulate enough funds to be able to actually complete the projects. So that's why you'll see typically for capital projects and also for one-time funding, you'll see a request to carry over. Basically, we're carrying over the budget or funding for next year so they could complete that project. So that's for this year is the alley improvement, which is recurring funding, the traffic calming, pavement maintenance, as well as the traffic signal that was funded last year. So just a couple updates here. Staff is still working on closing the year. We're typically done in December, early December for the Measure X AUP. That one's going to be completed December, and you should be receiving that during the next meeting that we have with the committee. The audit's actually going to start in October 1st. And again, we're going to carry over any outspent funds to the next year. This is only typically for one-time cost and for projects. So. And that's it. I don't know if you have any questions on specific things on the expenditure report.
All right, so we'll start with member two.
I love that I always get to be first.
All right.
I feel like it puts me on the spot, like I got to be on top of my game. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I do have a question. So just to confirm, so I understand, so I know I'm understanding this correctly. On slide number 3, there's a carryover of $5,093,537. And of that, 4.4 million is essentially earmarked for ongoing projects or reoccurring projects. Am I
So
understanding that correctly?
yes,
slide
so the recurring funding is, for example, alley improvement, they actually get a recurring funding of 1.5 million every year, so that's recurring. They have spent some of that, but then alley improvements 1.5 might not be enough, for example, to complete a certain project, right? So they might accumulate enough fund to carry over. Once they have enough funding, they could go and work on that certain section or certain section of the street. When we carry over funding, we're just carrying over the budget for them so they could complete it. But your answer is correct. This is recurring funding, but it's for capital projects, and we do for these type of requests, we usually do approve, and departments are using it for their projects. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, there's economies of scale at work here where if you just release an RFP for City of Santa Ana to come and do $1.5 million of alley improvement work, you're not going to get that much. Whereas if you wait until you have some more, you're going to get a better pricing per square foot.
Oh, okay. I learned something new.
and then the other thing I was going to mention, so we'll carry over the funds, and we've reported this for Measure X purposes for this fiscal year, call it 23-24. Next year, you'll see the funding for the new funding for that year, so call it 24-25. But they're actually spending those funds for Measure X, that 23-24 funding. But for purposes of Measure X, we report the uses of those funds for that fiscal year. So they're actually working on, there's costs happening in the background, but for your report that we show you, we only report uses of those funds for that year. I don't know if that confused them, but.
Let me process that. Okay.
Okay.
Can I also ask though, generally, what is the alley improvement program? What are they doing with the alleys? They're repairing alleys, just repaving alleys?
There's a lot of needs for repairs for alleys in the city, and so they're literally replacing alleys, like redoing them, because there's been, I think alleys are really old around the city, and so they're actually working on them, replacing them, and just putting new alleys in the city.
Yeah, it's mostly concrete work because the alleys is a lot of times what the garbage trucks or the refuse trucks are accessing. And so refuse trucks, with the weight of them, they really tear up roads
Right.
and alleys. And so if you were just to say do asphalt on top of an alley, it wouldn't last very long. So typically they're replacing segments of cement blocks.
Got it. Understood. Okay. I did have another question. You touched on this, and this is the budget deficit, the pre-Measure X deficit. So there's a line item here for 10.2 million. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. So for the fiscal year 2018, 2019, essentially, was there like a deficit? There just more money was spent than there was actually there.
Yeah.
And so does this mean that we're now taking funds from the 23-24 fiscal year and covering that shortage?
When you have your structural budget, is basically made up of recurring items. You have your regular recurring revenue coming in and your regular costs coming out. So for example, your property tax comes in each year and you pay police every paycheck, right? At that time, before Measure X was approved by the voters, the city council at that time adopted a budget for fiscal year 18-19 because Measure X was on the ballot for November 2018. And so they had already adopted a budget by that time in November. And that budget, they knew that they were going to spend more than what they took in. So what that means for that fiscal year is that they used some of the accumulated fund balance. So basically, it's almost like spending down your savings account. They didn't end up doing that because we ended up getting the Measure X passed and whatever. But the structural deficit was there and it wasn't changed. And so that means that structural deficit just keeps going into, that means the next year you still kept the same number of police officers, and the following year you still kept the same number of police officers. So you had a structural deficit built into your budget before this thing, and that's a recurring structural deficit. And so that's why we leave it there, because it also serves as a reminder to us all that the city's budget was unbalanced before Measure X was adopted. So Measure X is helping to plug a deficit that was a structural deficit that was created over a long time ago and
Okay.
existed.
So I guess to use your analogy, does this $10.2 million then plug that deficit from 2018?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
and does that wipe the slate clean? So to
No,
No,
no. Every year, because remember, this is you, with your structural deficit, your recurring money coming in, your recurring revenue is less than your recurring money going out. So the next year, it's, if you absent Measure X, the next year, you're still gonna have the same problem.
Mhm.
You're gonna be spending more than what you take in. And the next year after that, you're gonna have the same problem, spending more than what you take in. And so it's that constant structural problem. Like if you had a mortgage that was $3,000, but you only had a paycheck of 2,500 a month, you would have a structural deficit. So every month you would be
short.
short $500. And then the next month you're in the same pickle, you're short $500. And that's what we're talking about when we say structural deficit.
Oh, so this structural deficit exists from year to year.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so without Measure X, there would be no plug for this hole.
That is correct. And without Measure X, then they would, the city council would have to give us direction to reduce service levels in some way. So not only do we have all the service levels that were added with once Measure X was approved, like if Measure X went poof tomorrow, not only do we have all those services that we added after Measure X was approved, those would have to go away. But then on top of it, we'd have to find another equivalent to 11.7 million in today's dollars to cut out of the budget because of that structural deficit. So you'd
Okay.
really have to dig deep on your service levels and bring them way down to rebalance your budget.
Thank you for explaining that concept of the structural deficit to me, because I wasn't quite understanding it, but I think I understand it now.
Yeah.
Um,
And the reason I say 11.7 million, because it's that 10.2 plus the 1.5 right below it.
I do see
They
that.
just had it in two different line items in the budget document. And so that's why we report it that way, because it's good for us to keep this institutional memory of what it looked like back
Got it.
then.
It's a very visual way of seeing this structural deficit that you described,
Yeah.
this amount
Yeah.
that we need to plug that hole. I did have another question about one of the line items. At the very top, I don't know what page this is. Orange County Fire Contract increase to maintain service level, 10.6 million.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the ballot measure categories was retaining firefighters. Well, the one way that you can retain firefighters, meaning that you keep the same amount of firefighters, is that you pay them their contract when it increases every year. It can increase up to 4.5% per year. So each year that's somewhere around $1 million in the last X number of years. And so it's like $1 million plus $1 million plus $1 million plus $1 million. And then there's been, actually, you know what, it's closer to 2 million. I'm sorry. It's like 1.9 million. And so over the course of 5 years, that's how you get to 10 million. And like another 4.5% on top of that, and another compounded 4.5% on top of that. And so that's the growth in our contract cost since Measure X was approved.
Would it be fair to describe this as like basically salary increases or raises for the
Yeah.
Orange County Fire Authority?
Yeah, for the most part, there's some other issues in there too, like, they're increasing costs of equipment and maintenance, they're increasing costs of insurance, liability, things like that. But yeah, I'd say the lion's share of it, it's fair to characterize it as their salary increases each year.
Okay. All right. I think those are all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
There is a benefit to going first because you asked all my questions. My questions were related to the budget deficit, but your explanations were sufficient for my questions, so thank you. You're
Mr. Michael Chu, great questions. I appreciate that. I was gonna touch on the deficit also, but one of the things that I think I want to understand, having the opportunity to have structural deficits explained to us and to anybody, whoever watches this meeting. In regards to the unrestricted general revenue purposes, focused on homelessness and code enforcement, I think you answered my question, but what I wanted to get to is when we're looking at a line item like this, homelessness code enforcement, is Measure X dollars wholly taking care of code enforcement for homelessness, or is it a percentage of the budget allocated to homelessness code enforcement?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer to it. Because we have X number of code enforcement officers and this guy might be assigned this day to go out a half a day and deal with those issues, and that woman might be assigned tomorrow for a couple hours. So it's really hard to quantify. My gut tells me that for the most part, I think that what you're seeing there is the lion's share of let's put it this way. I don't think that our other general fund revenue sources are paying for much of code enforcement for homelessness. I think the lion's share of it is being borne by Measure X, because code enforcement officers don't just do that. They do a heck of a lot more, people not maintaining their properties. They look at, buildings and what's going on if something failed or this or that, so there's so much more going on in code enforcement besides just addressing homelessness issues. And so I think for the most part, the lion's share of what they do for homelessness is born in these line items in Measure X.
I got two more questions for you, Director. What about the COLT team that helps with homelessness? Same question. Is Measure X dollars wholly funding this line item and this effort, or is it a percentage of this scope of work that the COLT team does?
I think it's the lion's share.
Yeah, I actually think it's a lion's share because it's quality of life team. So that includes police and it also includes public works. They also have contracts to clean up encampments. So the bulk of share of quality of life team, I would say it is Measure X. There might be other funding that they might have, but as far as I know, I think it's mostly Measure X.
Yeah, there might be just a little bit of residual funding from somewhere else, but most of it's borne by Measure X.
Is it possible to allocate a percentage to a line item indicating how much Measure X dollars are covering for that particular line item? In both cases that I brought up, I would assume that I would see something close to 100% for both those line items. But I'm really curious how many line items within the Measure X breakdown are line items that are only partially covering a scope of work or a project.
I think very few. I think the ones are that I could primarily are going to be your contract increases. So like the OCF, the fire authority example that I just gave. Obviously our other general fund resources are paying for the lion's share of that. Measure X is only paying for that incremental increase since 1819. Same goes for ambulance contract. And the same goes for police, the base police salaries. There was increases paid for by Measure X. So it's just a handful of line items. When you see discrete things like adding a librarian for some programs or, the quality of life team. When you see those kinds of discrete line items on the Measure X funding plan, you can pretty much be sure that it's at 100% or near 100% funded by Measure X.
Gotcha. I appreciate that explanation. Thank you very much.
Great questions. Love the conversation about the beginning deficit. I think it's a great reminder for everyone that, where the nexus of where this began was, I think on your, on the percentage type thing, I think if we were able to look at, like, we'll use the OCF, the fire contract. I mean, if we were able to, from a percentage basis, I think if we were able to look at what is 10.67 million versus the entire contract, that would be because we're saying that 10.675 million, and I'm not saying you need to do it now, Pat. But I
can pull
think
it up.
that would probably, like, hey, how much of the contract is really Measure X? Because that's the increase since when Measure X came into place, which is where and then on Colt, I think we could do the same type of thing of like, well, what was the funding for Colt, before the period before Measure X versus, we've got time value money, and every year that it goes along, that gets bigger and bigger, right?
51.3 million is the total OCFA contract for this year. So if you take that
Wow, so
51.3 minus the 10% or whatever, so yeah, you're talking about 20%.
Yeah, and maybe even 25, if you look at the 40 million pre versus 59. Yeah, that's so this is a big, this is big chunks of funding, for sure. And so when we talk about that beginning structural deficit, it just compounds what we're continuing to rely upon heavily on Measure X. So those are, I think, great questions. A couple other questions that I had on the carryover amounts. Are these so of the five, we'll call it 5.1 million, is that 100% restricted to those projects, or can a council say, oh, never mind, we don't want to do the alley improvements, let's take that 1.4 million and move it somewhere else? Or is it once it's done in a particular year, does it restrict it to that program?
The city councils could certainly direct us to use it for something else because it is general fund money. So I think, maybe in the vernacular that we can all understand and that the public could understand is that by being that budget line item for alley improvements, it's earmarked for alley improvements. That might be a good way to frame it. But, an earmark is an earmark. When you have your budget, you may say to yourself, I'm going to earmark, this $1,000 to go on vacation or something out of my budget. But then something happens and your air conditioning fails and nope, not going to go on vacation, going to use it for air conditioning. Same kind of thing. They could give us direction to do something else.
Okay, so it doesn't go into like a restricted, it doesn't move
No.
over into a restricted fund or anything like that. Okay,
No.
good to know. Thank you. But yeah, I think we all understand earmarks are putting in things in buckets and like, hey, this is the intended purpose, and unless a disaster happens, hopefully we can stay with that purpose. The vehicle incentive program. So I know that was a highly wanted program at the very beginning, and I think it was just shy of $1 million. Was it 800,000? That we've spent on, I think that was on a, that would be,
It was like 807 that we spent
Okay.
last year.
and, but we're no longer doing that in the future. Is there a sales tax consultant? Maybe it's too small of a number for him to even worry about, but, does he, when I hear that the sales tax on, the cars is down, is there, are they seeing a correlation to where, like, does this pay for itself and bring it back, or does it not pay for itself? Wasn't it as successful as maybe we wanted it to be? Has there been any discussion with the consultant on that?
I think to answer your question shortly, no, there's been no discussion on that. But based on my understanding of our auto sales, and the details, I just can't imagine how that could possibly be sussed out to see what the impact the VIP the vehicle incentive program had. Because there's so much that causes fluctuation in auto sales that has nothing to do with our VIP program. So if you saw a decrease in auto sales, it may have nothing to do with the sunsetting of the vehicle incentive program. It may have everything to do with, interest rates being higher, or, even as something as silly as, the no sexy new models this year, that kind of thing. So.
And conversely, it'd probably be the same way if sales were increasing and there was a VIP program, like, can we really put the nexus to that program, or is it because there's a new
Yeah.
model that came out that everyone
Yeah.
loves?
Yeah, and we saw that vehicle sales did pitch up after, or shortly after not shortly after, but during the pandemic, because remember, there was all that federal stimulus money. And so people, found it was a good idea, and then there was a little bit of a backlog of, remember, we went through a period where you couldn't get chips or something. And so then they had no inventory, the dealerships, and then all of a sudden they started getting chips again, and inventory came, and people had federal stimulus money pent up. And so then we saw an uptick in auto sales that was kind of temporary, but yeah, there's so many factors that influence yeah.
All right, great. And then I know that the numbers that we've been looking at, they're unaudited and all that type of stuff. What is your target date for your ACFR?
Usually about December.
Before Christmas?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
usually
yeah.
About December 10th,
Okay.
roundabouts there, give or take 3 or 4 days either way, is usually when it's issued with the opinion on it.
Okay.
Certainly we know the final numbers before the the book is issued with the opinion, because the field work is finalized. The auditors don't have any more questions for us. So we know that at this point, it's just a matter of, peer review, ticking and tying, putting the book together. That all takes a few weeks. So we typically know the final numbers, sometime in November, but the book gets published roundabouts December 10th.
Yeah.
That feels like really early, if in comparison to, I suspect, other cities of our size, my gut tells me that's on the early side. So
It is.
kudos to your group
Is,
on
yeah,
that.
and kudos to
the
Sarah,
auditors, too.
our accounting manager. She is amazing, and she's an amazing leader and has a great team, and she is all over it. Because she wants to go on vacation. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, even during COVID, we still issued with around the same time frame, early December. Like, it has not changed, even with all the gas fees that they're coming out with and all the extra hours that we have to do to implement these. They still issue around the same time frame. So
Excellent. I think that was all my questions that I have, and I think that is, let's see, all of our. So unless someone else come in
I actually
on a
have
comment
two-
or
I have
a
two more
follow up,
questions.
yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm full of questions tonight. I have a very basic question about sales tax on vehicle purchases. So let's say a Santa Ana resident purchases a vehicle out of state or out of the county. Do they pay sales tax for, like, based on, their residence here in the city of Santa Ana?
I don't know about out of state, but certainly out of city, anywhere in California, they will pay the sales tax based on their home sales tax.
Got it. Okay.
And let me piggyback on that. If they register it early enough to where the state feels that they bought it out of state, but the original use was in California, they'll charge the Measure X the full amount, I believe. If it's been 2 years since they bought it in Nevada and they kind of lived there and then they're moved here, then they won't.
Moving on, different topic. The pension stabilization line item, 9.5 million. So was that amount used to stabilize the pension fund for the city? What exactly is that?
Yep, we stabilized it. No, I'm just kidding. We basically use that money to put in a set aside, a savings account, if you will, that's an irrevocable trust. Can't use it for anything else now. We put it into an irrevocable trust for future use on pension costs. So why we call that pension stabilization is that your future pension costs may look like this. So then we can use the money in this account to take care of some of those peaks and keep it a little bit more level and stable for budget purposes.
Is it kind of like a rainy day fund?
Not really. No, it really is.
but
Because
is-
rainy day is like for an emergency.
Okay.
And this isn't for an emergency. This is for those peaks in the future years, peaks of costs, because
And-
there will be peaks.
Anticipated peaks.
Yes.
Okay. But it's not to plug an existing hole.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my only question. All right. Thank you.
All right, anything else from my colleagues here? No, all right. Well, I think that is the end of our calendar, of our business calendar. So does staff have we don't have anything to vote on or anything like that. So if we the staff comments.
I would just ask you, the committee, to consider whether or not we should, you want presentations from departments. And if you want them in December, you want them in March, you want them in a special meeting, we can accommodate a special meeting for just, other department presentations. Because keep in mind, your December meeting, you do get the presentation from the independent auditor with the final Measure X report. And then you also get a presentation from our sales tax consultant, who is new this year, by the way. We switched over to a different company. So you'll get those two presentations, and if you want a department presentation too, that's great, or you want a special meeting for that, we'll accommodate whatever.
I don't think I think the protocol would be to email email y'all, is that right? I mean, obviously we can say it now too during our comments, but we can't agree to.
Yeah, you
but-
can kind of give us a heads up of what you might be thinking. That's fine. You're not making a decision as a committee, and then we can accommodate and arrange. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think when we do our comments, we can give give our kind of our thoughts on that.
Alex, do you have any other staff comments?
Yeah, just thank you for showing up, because would not have a quorum if 4 of you guys didn't show up. But thank you, and thank you for the questions too. They're really, really good questions. So.
Yeah, it's nice to see that you guys are so engaged. We appreciate it, because we absolutely do appreciate you. It'd be terrible if we were just, talking to people who couldn't care less. When I just want you to know, it is an ongoing project. When I get my opportunities, I do speak with council members about, hey, we need some seats filled. So, but I'm sure you guys talk to council members as well at various city events or whatever else. So feel free to back me up on that one. So they're hearing it from a couple different sources.
Okay, well, so I'm assuming that you're good, Kristen. All right, very good. So we're gonna start with our leadoff hitter down there.
Again, the pressure. I don't know if I can handle it. Thank you for being patient with all of our questions. I know, particularly for me, I ask questions that are probably very basic, but I appreciate the explanations, because, it's a lot to digest when you're not familiar with this kind of stuff, with like, what do we call these, like accounting reports? I don't know.
Yeah, don't worry. 6 months from now, we're going to have you helping us with bank recs.
I'm a lawyer. I don't deal with numbers like this. But anyway, in terms of possible presentations for December, I know that the protocol, I guess, is to email you guys. But I just wanted to sort of raise this with the committee as a whole. Personally, for me, I think I would like a presentation from the police department. In particular, I noticed some of the description, part of the description here in the line for the police is, let's see, criminal investigations, gang prevention and suppression, et cetera. And I guess I'd like to hear more about what all of that entails from someone from the police department. I am very curious, like what are they doing in terms of gang prevention and suppression? How are they using those funds from Measure X to do that work? So that's just, my thoughts.
A second presentation from the police department. I don't think we've heard from them in a while, so it'd be good to hear kind of what's going on and what they're doing with the Measure X funding. In terms of recruiting other members, we need to do that for sure, because I will not be here December 11th. I will be out of town, so we won't have a quorum unless we recruit more members. So I just wanted to put that out there on the record, that if anyone's listening from the public and is interested, please apply. We're a great group to work with. Thank you very much for the presentations this evening.
So can I ask a clarifying question about additional members for the committee? Do they have to be from the other wards? You can't have, okay, 2 committee members from the same ward. Okay, understood.
I also second Commissioner Chu's request. I think that's a good idea, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the possibility of having some other departments here that we haven't talked to in the past. And I had an interesting situation happen, and it actually happened to me twice. And constituents within my neighborhood and within my ward had told me about a situation with code enforcement, and I think housing was going to homes that are being rented and asking tenants to be invited inside to look for any issues that they might be dealing with. And it was kind of interesting to hear that. And I had heard from older constituents that live in the area that there was a lot more code enforcement happening around their neighborhoods, when there is clutter in their homes, or they see people in construction trucks working at a home, they're going over there to check on, is there permitting. Now, the last time I spoke to anybody at code enforcement was about, I would say maybe 4 years ago. It might have been pre-pandemic, but at that time they had told us that code enforcement does not have the personnel to be able to do proactive code enforcement, that they absolutely depend on neighbors identifying issues. So I know it may not be a specific line item, but I'm very curious about housing authority and how they are being funded by Measure X, and how Measure X also can help them. But at the same time, code enforcement and how they're using Measure X dollars, and I guess the uptick in focus in areas in which I had not heard of before. Not saying that it's a good thing, but I'm also not saying that it's a bad thing, but I'm very curious to find out, what their marching orders are, and if we have the ability to request them to come and explain that to us, I think that would be great.
All right, excellent. Is code enforcement, is that part of CDA,
Planning and building.
planning and building? Is that the same as public works or no?
No.
So because we've heard from police, I think about a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
maybe somewhere in that ballpark. So and I think, originally that was one of our prime, like we wanted to that was one of the big ones. So I think that would be great. I don't know if we'd be able to do 2 on that particular, knowing that we have the AUP and the sales tax consultant, which generally is not, extreme long, but maybe with a new consultant, it might, I don't know what he or she has planned. But I agree that the PD would be on my top of my list. I have public works on mine also. But I think I'm probably more thinking public works was more code enforcement in my head. So, which I think is where you're kind of thinking also is code enforcement. So, yeah. Okay. And then, gosh, this is why I write stuff down, because I forget. Oh, in terms of, so we won't have we know that we're not gonna have a quorum on the 11th. I don't have faith that anything's gonna happen between now and the 11th, especially with an election coming up. And so I guess I would say, you know, if there's another date that we could find.
We'll reach
Obviously,
out.
you have a city calendar that, yeah, that we need to work around. Which also brings up, you know, with elections and things can change and that type of stuff. But probably not for that particular meeting, but you know, might hope get some movement there. But and then in terms of new folks, I did not think that our Measure X required the person to live in the ward if they, you know, were not able to find someone. I thought they could then go outside the wards.
You might be right. I may be remembering incorrectly. I'll look at it.
Which, I mean, obviously we want to have broad representation, right? I mean, we don't want everyone to be in the same neighborhood, all, you know, echoing the same things because, you know, everyone has different issues, but, you know, if we can still get a cross representation of the city, I mean, because we are, I mean, all it takes is one person to be caught up in a meeting in LA that they can't even make it here today, right? And then, I mean, this is a real thing. And so I don't know, we might want to maybe confirm that, and or see if it is something that, you know, if someone's got someone else.
Yeah, I think it's a
you know,
good
that-
idea to just double check.
Yeah.
We'll double check.
That might incentivize the members that don't have representation here to really actively seek out other members in their wards to serve.
Well, the incentive, usually, I mean, I've gone to council and asked, you know, specifically asked them to do that. I would, you know, if my colleagues are so inclined, I mean, I'm not sure if they understand. I mean, they should understand quorums. I mean, they get that. They generally don't have an issue with quorums, right? But I mean, ours has a major issue with quorum. Other, you know, committees also have some issues with quorums. Fortunately, we've been able to juggle it, right? We're all committed to it, but you know, so I would encourage, you know, us to kind of prod. You know, they're obviously not in our wards, right? But you know, I mean, you know, it seems strange that we've had some vacant seats on this committee for quite some time in the same wards. So it's unfortunate because there are voices out there that we should be hearing from too. So, okay, yeah, yes.
So we can take a poll for the meeting in December, but I guess my question would be, do we want to do early December or do we want to push it to January?
I think the first thing we should do is reach out to member Lewis and find out when she's going to be out of town and when she's available, and then we can pick some dates to poll the entire committee.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll be able to, you know, midweek type stuff. I'm usually able to schedule around on some things. So yeah, we'll look forward to that. Those polling emails. So I know I mean the city calendar is probably as crazy, if not crazier than ours. So yeah. So okay. Anything else from over here? All right. Well, I think if my notes are showing correctly here, then that wraps it up, and we will adjourn the meeting. Normally I would say until our December 11th meeting, which I guess is still on the calendar, but we know it's going to change. So we'll stay all flexible on that. So